Welcome to Arcade Memories, where I will go over great arcade games that not only littered the American landscape back in the day, but those that stuck with me over the years and made an impact in my young gaming life. This is Popeye. So back in 1981, Nintendo was still a very young company in the video game business. They had some success with their color TV game and the Game & Watch portable system. They eventually wanted to branch out to arcade games and develop Sheriff and Radar Scope, both of which didn't make the sort of splash Nintendo was hoping for. The company wasn't doing so great despite the impact that the Game & Watch went on to have. They sat on tons of unsold Radar Scope arcade cabinets at one point. Now, we have all heard about how a young Miyamoto went on to create Donkey Kong and how Nintendo used the old Radar Scope cabinets to house the new game. But many out there might not be aware that this was not the original plan that Miyamoto or Nintendo had in mind. During the early 1980s, Popeye was seeing a slight uptick in popularity with the Popeye Hour by Hanna-Barbera released in 1978, and then the release of the 1980s live-action Popeye movie with Robin Williams and Shelley Duvall. During this time, Nintendo was trying to acquire the rights to the Popeye characters for a video game. Whether it's due to the TV show and the movie bringing the franchise back to the spotlight is something I do not know. Unfortunately, they did not get the rights to the characters, and Nintendo had to pivot to either getting the rights to another cartoon franchise or come up with original characters all on their own. This right here is what led to the creation of the Donkey Kong characters in place of the Popeye ones. Donkey Kong would be the Pluto of the new game, Jumpman or Mario would replace Popeye, with Pauline being the olive oil to the story. Both games would offer the same love triangle theme as well as very cartoony visual presentations overall. After Donkey Kong became a smash hit for Nintendo and proved to the world that they were to be taken seriously, they would ultimately get the rights to Popeye by 1982. The game was designed by Genyo Takeda and Shigeru Miyamoto. There are 3 stages in total and, surprisingly, no jump mechanics built into the Popeye character, but the design of the game soon makes it clear that such a feature would have been useless. The game's premise is simple. Olive oil throws different objects down on each stage, and you have to collect them before they hit the water and break. If you don't, you lose a life and Olive comes down and scolds you. The first stage is that of a neighborhood, although I have seen some websites call it a dock area, which actually makes sense since there is water at the base of the level. Come to think of it, all the levels have water at the base. This stage right here has the most to offer out of all the 3. It is the only stage to have that bucket that can be dumped into Pluto's head, incapacitating him for a few seconds. This and stage 2 are also the only ones where you can enter on one side of the screen and appear on the other. And the upper platforms also serve as a buffer since Pluto seems to never go up there for some reason. You also have one can of spinach that mysteriously teleports between floors. The object that Olive throws here are hearts. Collect 24 of these to fill your house with hearts and you finish the level. However, along the way you have to deal with Pluto. He will skulk around the level and always be watching for where you are. He can swipe at you if you are above him or below, and he can also body throw himself between floors to get to you faster. His weight and impact are so massive that the entire screen shakes from the landing. He also throws bottles at you from time to time. Yep, he's a real bastard. The Sea Hag also makes an appearance throughout the game. She's just gonna pop in from time to time and throw one bottle at you. The tricky thing with her is that she can sometimes appear on both sides of the screen at the same time, making her projectiles hard to punch. The second stage is Bison Buildings. The theme here is music, with Olive playing the flute and dropping down musical notes. This stage also has Wimpy and Sweet Pea. For those out there that might not be so well versed in the Popeye characters, Wimpy is the one down here by the seesaw. He's the one who's always eating hamburgers in the comics and cartoons. Sweet Pea is an orphan that was adopted by Popeye and Olive Oyl. I won't get into the whole backstory with him because it's weird, but get this, his real name in the comics, I'm not making this up, is Schooner, Sewell, Georgia, Washington, Christopher, Columbia, Daniel Boom.
What the shit? That's the coolest name ever!
Who was smoking what and how much when they came up with that? I'm just gonna stick with Sweet Pea. He sits atop the flying balloon here with a huge sign of a cleft note. You can spring yourself to the top using the seesaw. Now, believe it or not, this part right here was something that Miyamoto originally had planned to use in Donkey Kong, but the programmers found this difficult to implement, so it was left out of the game. This is the only stage that has this feature. If you hit Sweet Pea's platform, you get 500 points. Hit it while having the spinach power-up and you get 1000. Hey, high scores were like marking your territory back then in the arcades. Trust me, it was a big deal. Collect all the notes and a little tune plays, letting you know that the level has completed. The last stage is on an old ship. Olive oil is carried in by a buzzard and dropped all the way on the top. She will throw down letters that spell help. And each letter you collect places another step for a ladder that goes all the way to the top. Collect enough letters and the ladder will reach all the way to the top, allowing you to climb up and reunite with Olive Oil. Pluto, once again, is sporting a new color suit on this level.
A lovely two-piece polyester suit highlighted by a prestigious looking black belt courtesy of Snake Emporium. Suit provided by Polyester Piece.
The stage is tricky with the conveyor belt that slides back and forth. The momentum of it can sometimes cause you to fall. There's also a lot of openings on the floors, allowing you to get down to the bottom faster. But that can also be a problem. This level also had that annoying buzzard bird flying in over and over again. So on top of the fact that you have Pluto and the hag to deal with, now you have the bird. If you manage to beat this level, the game starts all over again, but this time with a higher difficulty. The hag will now be stationed on the top right of the screen at all times and throw down skulls that bounce all over the stage. And this ramps up the difficulty significantly. The game has various difficulties that alter the gameplay just a little bit. The easier it is, the less likely the hag appears on the sides of the screen. Pluto also tends to be a little bit less aggressive and won't swipe at you or jump down as often. The difficulty that I played on must have been high since he constantly hounded me and the hag appeared every other time. Sometimes it gets overwhelming, but luckily Popeye handles pretty well and the controls are quite responsive. This game and another I will go over in a future episode cemented my love for arcades at a very early age. I used to walk about 3 blocks to a local laundromat to play this game almost every other day. And what was great was that the laundromat would always have another arcade next to it and would alternate them. But not Popeye, at least not for a while. Eventually, the laundromat closed down, but there were some great memories of visiting that place every so often and finding a new arcade cabinet waiting to be played. I could walk down a few shops to the local market and get a soda or even something to eat in between breaks. When I wasn't playing the game in the arcades, the closest that I got to a good port back then was the one for the Atari 2600, which wasn't bad considering the limitations of that system. The game was ported to almost every console and computers back then. Yes, even the god-awful Odyssey 2 got a port. The ColecoVision port and the Texas Instrument 99 PC ports were the best ones until the NES one came out a few years later. Nintendo did release a tabletop Game & Watch version of Popeye, but it wasn't anything like the arcades. From the looks of it, it is a very early take on a one-on-one beat-em-up game that looks pretty good for its time. I wish I would have owned this puppy back in the day. I did have a Donkey Kong mini arcade from Coleco though, but this one right here looks much better. The arcade cabinet was also released in Europe, but by Atari, not Nintendo, and it looks slightly different as well. They also released a sit-down tabletop cabinet. Popeye would get other titles released throughout the years, but this one right here, I think made the most impact. Not only personally, but for the entire industry. Now think about it. Had Nintendo gotten the rights to Popeye initially, they might not have come up with the Donkey Kong characters and therefore no Mario and no Donkey Kong, so on and so on. To think that a character that is so obscure now had a hand in affecting the entire video game industry to this day. Nintendo might not be where it is right now if not for the success of Donkey Kong, and they have Popeye to thank for that. Anyone out there play this one? Ever hear about it? Or maybe your first time playing it was on a home port? Let us know below. Hope you all had a great time going very far back in the annals of video game history. Until next video, keep watching, keep gaming, and as always, take care of yourselves.